the featured speaker tonight is Janice Weiner. She is my Senate colleague, has been this year, and has become a great friend of mine. Janice was elected to the Iowa Senate just last year. She represents Iowa City and University Heights. She grew up in the Iowa City area and is a graduate of Princeton University and Stanford Law School. Coincidence, she and I were on the Princeton campus together. I was a graduate student and didn't know very many undergrads, and that's my loss. But I'm glad I've met her now. She served the United States overseas for 26 years as a Foreign Service officer, really posted everywhere around the globe. Now prior to her election to the Iowa Senate, she served on the City Council in Iowa City, and she works in lay leadership in her synagogue. She served in various capacities for Shelter House, UNA/USA, Global Ties Iowa, and the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council. So she's busy. Her priorities include championing local control, women's reproductive rights, public education, and defending democracy. And in the Senate, she serves on the Ethics, Judiciary, State Government, Veterans Affairs Committee, and is a ranking member of the Local Government Committee, a post which, by the way, I held my first term in the Senate as well. So please welcome a good friend of mine and a great Senator, Janice Weiner.
Hello, Story County. It's great to be here. As I sort of drove here, I thought, like, where is this place? In the dark. Anyway, as Herman said, I'm Janice Weiner. I am the state senator for District 45, which is most of Iowa City. Joe Bolcom was my predecessor. I'm really happy to be in the Senate. Herman is a great colleague. First, though, I want to commend Senator Kernbach for inviting the person who represents Iowa City and the Hawkeyes to come to Ames to speak to a crowd of Cyclone supporters. It's a statement. We do, as he mentioned, share another set of colors. Don't worry, I'm just taking off a jacket. Does that look familiar to you, Herman? Black and orange, Princeton Tiger colors. But seriously, it is both symbolic and incredibly important that we come together because we represent and serve all Iowans. We are both lifelong public servants. We take our jobs very seriously, and we quite literally put people over politics. As Herman said, I was a US diplomat for 26 years. And in fact, I was speaking this past Monday to a group of State Department German hands with whom I served at one point or another. And they asked me to speak because they wanted to know what it was like being a state senator. So in addition to telling them how being a diplomat did a good job of preparing me, I also decided to step back into my old State Department reporting officer skin. I closed my eyes and imagined if I were writing a reporting cable to my superiors at the State Department, what would I tell them about Iowa politics and the legislature? What would I highlight and how would I explain it? So I thought I would share that with you as well. As I said earlier, we're elected to be public servants. We're not elected to just serve our donors. We're not elected to just work for wealthy people. We're elected to serve all our constituents. My mother always referred to elected officials, both in Des Moines and in Washington, as my employees in Washington or my employees in Des Moines. And I've always kept that in mind. So first, if I were doing this reporting, I would describe a disconnect. How little heed many Republicans seem to pay to their constituents right now. They ignore them. Many don't respond to attempts to contact them. They don't show up for public forums. They vote for legislation that they know is highly unpopular. like school vouchers and the 6-week abortion ban. And as a reporting officer analyzing that, I would say that this hubris likely will come back to bite them. I'd be writing that taking all that into account, they may have just swung too far to the right, lost touch, and lost the moderate middle. In my experience, taking voters for granted is not something Iowans appreciate. They don't take to it kindly, and it's now to the point where farmers and landowners who don't want carbon capture pipelines complain to Democrats who largely represent urban and suburban areas, that their own representatives and senators aren't listening to them. And since it appears that Republicans are taking their votes for granted, they might just consider shifting their voting patterns. We've seen that in the past in Iowa. It's time to make that happen again. And if I were writing this reporting cable, I'd look at the sweep of Iowa history and emphasize that what Iowa was long famous for, its vaunted public education system, has lost substantial ground over the past 7 years. Senator Quirmbach can tell you to the penny just how far behind we've fallen in terms of funding. Traveling across the state, it's clear that this is an issue in towns big and small. People are angry. They care about their schools, their Friday night football games, and they know that the public schools are community, and that if their public schools die, their communities wither. And I'd express concern that the state universities are having an increasingly hard time attracting and retaining faculty, including at our flagship medical facility. I'd also note that one party appears to be attempting to consolidate power and degrade the state's democratic institutions. I'd write that the water is dirty and that didn't used to be the case. That there are not enough people in the workforce and the young people appear to be leaving. And that the governor, who's been amassing power in the administrative state, appears determined to cut taxes even more. So that if Kansas, under Governor Brownback, was any measure, it seems like we're headed for a tipping point. And my analysis from all that, because after all, when you're writing a State Department reporting cable, you've set out the facts and then you have to mush them all together and come up with some sort of conclusions. My analysis would examine the values that Iowans hold dear and conclude that money in politics, giveaways to the wealthy, vouchers, of course, are nothing more than a massive wealth transfer from those in the 40-plus counties that have no private schools to those who can already afford to send their kids to private school. Plus, the damaging culture wars have distracted us from real Iowa values. As I said before, we value education. It's always been our calling card. And Iowa public school education took me to Princeton and Stanford. It's taken my younger daughter into the trades. She's a union carpenter's apprentice. Public schools take all comers, and they do their very best to help them succeed in life. We value opportunity for all. A decent wage for the middle class and the working class, health care that doesn't break the bank, family leave, quality, affordable child care, a hand up for those who need it, helping our neighbors. We saw a lot of the opposite in this past session. Bringing us together, not tearing us apart. We value accountability. We all have to account for our own household budgets. We all have to account for ourselves, to our family and friends. And what's good enough for public schools in terms of public-facing accountability ought to be good enough for private schools if they're going to receive public taxpayer dollars. We need transparency in state government, transparency in the budget and the budgeting process, transparency in the governor's office. We owe Iowans that basic respect. And we value freedom. But freedom isn't free, as many would have you think. It comes also with responsibility. Freedom to learn for all, not just those who look and think and act like us. Freedom to read. You don't want your kids to read a book? You don't want your kids to read a book? That's fine, don't let them read it, but you don't get to decide for every other kid in this state. Freedom to be who you are and freedom to love whom you love. And freedom to make your own reproductive decisions without any politicians in the exam room. And as Herman mentioned, we value democracy. Not the tearing down bit by bit of our democratic norms, which we've seen, which I watched over just my one session. I gave a speech at the Wingding where I think that the top 10 things Republicans did to tear down democratic norms this past session. Look, I spent a career in the Foreign Service trying to help build up and strengthen democracy. And talking up the importance of diversity. I was literally there when the Berlin Wall fell, and I saw how passionately people cared about gaining their freedoms. They put their lives on the line for it. We can't go back. We value the hard work of keeping our democracy intact and strengthening our institutions for our kids and our grandkids. Democracy isn't just a noun. It has to be an action verb. Those are our values. They are also our lights. I did a smaller fundraiser at the beginning of this week, and the theme was, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And this seemed particularly appropriate at this time of year and at this stage in Iowa politics. I think of our values as candles lighting the way. The local elections, where all across the state, Iowans showed the door to the culture war candidates. That's a bright candle. All our great candidates, some of whom you met tonight, many in winnable districts, those are bright candles. And we're raising money for them. Heaven knows when I raise money, I don't need the money in Iowa City, and Herman probably doesn't need the money here in Ames, but we need it so that we can elect more Democrats across this state. The lawsuits that have been brought against the benighted Senate File 496, one of the worst laws to come out of the last session, those suing, from the big book company to renowned authors to kids in our communities, are saying you can't take away our First Amendment right to free expression. You can't discriminate, and you can't legislate away equal protection. Those are bright candles. People sometimes ask us, like, how we keep going in the face of all this, and what I tell them is, it's our job to be the truth tellers, to help determine legislative intent, and to hold Republicans to account by telling them on the Senate floor what is unconstitutional and what is illegal. They may decide not to listen to us, but they can't say they didn't know. And then there's the work we all do to help our respective communities, showing up and helping. Those are all candles and they represent our values. You have a great senator who cares deeply about your community and about the state. Herman Krumbach cares. He wears it on his sleeve. And he does the work and he represents Iowa values. He is a true public servant and you are fortunate to have him. Thank you for supporting him. Thank you for coming and for support and for your donations that will support candidates all across the state. I just saw that our Senate Minority Leader, Pam Yocum, arrived. She's in the back. Say hi to Pam. Hi, Pam. So thank you so much for having me, Herman. And thank you all for lighting the way, because together we are the community that will get this done.